Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that the right book at the right time can change lives, and that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do here on the KidLit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature: picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels for readers of all ages. In each episode, we'll talk with children's literature authors and discuss their books, their hopes, their dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. Whether you're an adult reading to their inner child or connecting the young readers in your life with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. So grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of KidLit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, your KidLit Loving host, inviting you back to another bookish conversation with a children's literature author. Today, I'm talking with Jacqueline Davies. Jacqueline has written picture books, early chapter books, middle grade novels, and young adult novels too. Books like Panda Pants, The Night is Singing, the Sydney and Taylor series, Bell Bandit, The Candy Smash, and more. She's here today to discuss the graphic novel adaptation of her best-selling middle grade novel and ultimate series, The Lemonade War. The original novel was published in 2007 and has sold more than 2 million copies worldwide. It's available in 8 languages and has been nominated for over 15 awards. And now it's a graphic novel to connect to even more readers. It is a personal favorite of mine with lots of family memories attached to it, and I can't wait to talk about this new version. So let's get right to the episode. Jacqueline, welcome to KidLit Love. I'm so glad you're here today.
Hi, Stephanie. I'm delighted to be here. Your podcast is such a wonderful part of the bigger conversation around kids' books and literacy, so I'm just delighted to participate.
Thank you. Well, as we joked before we hit record, I'm more excited because I have such wonderful, fond, beautiful memories of reading The Lemonade War with and to my kids as part of a larger school-wide event. And so I just jumped at the opportunity to talk to you about this new version. So I win.
Well, let me just say, that warms my heart. It really does. I mean, if there's one image in my head that I cherish above all others when I think about kids reading my book, it's with kids, with their parents or caregivers, snuggled up. Sometimes it's a dog, sometimes it's a cat, that's fine. Snuggled up and reading the book and enjoying it together, and hopefully having conversations about what's in the book and what just happened and what was that about. And I love that thought more than anything else. So thank you. Thank you for reading with your kids.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So before we talk about the book and the new version of it, let's talk about you.
Oh, please.
This is book 20.
Yes,
So you've got a
20th
few of them under your belt. I would love for you to just give us a snapshot of your journey through children's literature and a little bit about you along the way.
You know, I don't think it's particularly different from a lot of authors in that it was a long road. It was a long road, and then suddenly it was a shorter road. I mean, it's one of those things where, I mean, I have wanted to be a writer since I was in elementary school. I used to make little books. I take them with me on school visits to show kids, to say, look, this is the first book I ever made, and now I'm a published author. And so I started writing. I was interested in being writer. I was interested in being published when I was very young. And then truthfully, I went to college. And I did end up majoring in creative writing, but I got some discouraging feedback when I was in college from some professors, and it kind of threw me off. And I thought, oh, I guess writing isn't really for me. At least that's what they were telling me. Writing wasn't really for me. But I came back to it when my kids were little, and I rediscovered children's books. I hadn't thought about writing children's books before. I always thought I would write for adults. But now here I was rediscovering these books I had adored as a child, and I got to share them with my kids. And the whole thing was just so joyful and wonderful. And the books were so good. There were so many good books that I was reading to my kids. And I, it reawakened something in me. And I said, oh, I do still want to write, but I want to try this kind of writing, which I'd never thought about before. Well, writing for children is a lot of craft. It's not just talent and good ideas. It's the craft of how you can create a story that speaks to children. And I didn't know anything. And of course, I started trying to write picture books, which you think are going to be the easiest of the children's books, and they are the hardest thing. They are a puzzle that you need to really crack before you can do it. So I joined a writing group, thank goodness, other people who are writing for children. I learned so much from them and kept writing picture books, kept writing. I got rejections on my picture books for 6 years, at least 6 years, nothing but rejections. And at one point, I decided I was going to try to write a novel. Never done that before. And I decided to write a middle grade historical fiction novel. And I was at a weekend-long retreat, and one of the people there, one of the mentors there was Jane Yolen, and she read the manuscript. Now, okay, this is me not knowing what the heck I'm doing. You are supposed to submit the first 20 pages to the mentor. All of us at the retreat got a mentor. You're supposed to submit the first 20 pages. I gave the whole thing. I didn't realize. It was in a binder. I just handed it to her, and she read the whole thing. Wow. I mean, can you believe that? She read the whole thing, and she came back to me and she said, we're going to get this published. We're going to do this. And so she was then the one who was introducing me to editors, and I did finally end up with a wonderful editor at Marshall Cavendish Children's Books. And so that was my road to getting my first book published. I just want to emphasize 6 years of rejection letters. But during that entire time, I was learning. I was showing my work to other children's authors. I was getting feedback. I was revising. I was trying something new. Oh, picture books isn't going to work. Maybe something else. And I stuck with it. And, I say that to kids, but it's as good a message for adults.
Yeah.
If you want to be in this business, you have to have some perseverance. Mm-hmm. And, it's wonderful, those people who write their first book and get it published. That's great. But for most of us, it's a longer road. But I will say, I was about to say I enjoyed every minute of it. I really did not enjoy every minute of it, but I enjoyed a lot of it. I enjoyed the camaraderie, even the commiseration about rejections. I enjoyed getting better. That felt really good. Mm-hmm. So a long road, but a fruitful road, and also a fun road in its own way.
Yeah. I'm so glad you just addressed that, because my follow-up question was going to be, how do you keep going in that 6-year time? What do you do? How do you keep the spirits up? How do you keep that eye on the prize? And it sounds like a lot of it is you loved the process of doing it and the things that came with it.
That's, for me, the crux of it. It's different for every person. I would absolutely say it for me, being in a group was essential. I had been trying to write on my own for years, and there was this group that met at the local library once a month, and it took me months to get up the courage to go. And so to have people around me who were both a little farther ahead of me and a little farther behind, and also right where I was, it fed me. It fed me and it kept me going. I do love writing. I mean, there are some writers who do not love writing. They like having written. They like already having the work. Right. But I actually enjoy the work. I find it so stimulating and so challenging. So that was important. The other thing is going to conferences and just getting some energy. You go to these conferences, there's so many people there, so they're talking about things that fascinate you, and writers live in this little world, this little solitary world, not only inside our houses, our bedrooms, but also just inside our minds. And so it's really important to get out there and just feed on the energy of like 250 people who have gathered this weekend to talk about writing children's books. So that also kept me going. I also, as I said, it was a lifelong dream. I mean, I've wanted to be a writer since I was a kid, and that definitely helped pull me through. So I would just say to anybody, find whatever it is for you, whether it's community or whether it's, going to the library and just filling up on all the good books that are out there that inspire you and make you say, wow, I can't leave this alone. So find whatever it is for you, because you're going to need it. It's a long haul. You're going to need something that keeps you going.
Yeah. But then, as you also mentioned, once you got there, it was like a 6-year overnight success, right? And start having this beautiful domino snowball effect of that energy. Just it builds and builds. Once you get that first book too.
Right. But any author's going to tell you it's a myth that once you get that first book published, you're set.
Right.
It's just like, oh, well, now everything's going to be easy. It isn't. In some ways, it gets harder.
Yeah.
My second book was a picture book, so I did finally crack that code of how to write a picture book. And I've written, I think I have 6 or 7, I can't remember, picture books. So I do write picture books. But it's not like the gates of publishing open up for you once you have that first book out. I mean, unless it becomes a New York Times bestseller, and then I'm sure that's not what happened with my book. My book was published by a mid-sized publisher, Cavendish Children's Books, and they were delighted with the numbers of books that book sold. It got a lot of state awards, a lot. And they were delighted with it. And yet, if I had been if that book had been one of the big 5, it would not have been considered a success. Well, it wouldn't have been considered. It wouldn't have been the kind of thing that would have laid out the red carpet for me. Here you go. So, I mean, it was quite a few more books. I mean, it wasn't until The Lemonade War, which was my 5th published book, that really I had a book that got some traction. And then that changed. That changed how my publishing career was going. But it didn't happen immediately.
Right. So let's go back to 2007.
The time machine.
Yes.
Back. We should go wavy.
No. Go in the Wayback Machine here. 5th book, 2007. I feel like now it's this like iconic classic middle grade book that when you mention it, we all know it. And I would love for you to just go back there and tell us about the inspiration behind it. Like, how did the Lemonade War come to be, and kind of recap it for us a bit before we head into the graphic version.
Okay. And I do want to stress that when the book came out, nobody expected anything from it. I mean, it was on a path to be just one more middle grade book that came out. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But first, I'll talk about the initial inspiration. At school visits, kids ask me all the time, where do you get your ideas? Where do you get your ideas? Where do you get your ideas? And it is true that ideas are everywhere. They're like fruit just waiting to get picked, but you just have to be open to it, receptive to it. For me, it's, I kind of think of it as being my spidey sense. I'll be out in the grocery store and I'll overhear a conversation and it'll just be like, that could be a children's book. Or I'll be, at one of my kids' events and just kind of sitting in the audience and waiting, and I'll see somebody walk by and say, oh, that could be a character in a book. So there's so many things that come to me in that way. This particular book happened because my 2 boys got into an argument about a lemonade stand. We used to do lemonade stands all the time. My kids are grown up now, so this is a while back. And my older son was 10 and my younger son was 8. And my younger son, Henry, had a friend over and they decided to do a lemonade stand, which is something my kids did often. So there's a whole routine to it. There's a certain table that you put in the driveway. There's a certain blue pitcher. There's a certain bowl that keeps the change in it. I mean, it's a whole thing. So they got it all set up in the driveway. And my older son, Sam, also had a friend over. And when he saw what they were doing, he said to his friend, let's go join them and then we can get some of the money. And so he went up to Henry and he said, hey, Henry, do you want some help? Henry said, no. We already did all the work. We're all set to go. We did all the work. You can't show up at the last money and think we're at the last minute and think we're going to split the money with you. It does not work that way. So Sam said, "Oh, come on, we'll bring a lot of business your way." And Henry said, "It's a busy street. There's always foot traffic. We just don't need you. No, go away." And they started arguing, and it got louder and louder and louder. And finally, Sam said to Henry, "Fine, you won't let us be part of your lemonade stand. We're just going to make our own lemonade stand on the other side of the street, and we're going to take all your business away from you." And I heard this whole argument because I was standing on the front porch watching it develop. And when I heard that, I thought, oh, this is going to become a lemonade war. And that
And
spidey
here we
sense,
go.
just there it is. It was just like, that is such a good title for a book. I never begin my books with titles. Titles are often the very last thing that I come to, but The Lemonade War sounded like such a good title. I was positive somebody had already written that book. I went inside, I Googled it. No, nobody had written it. And I thought, okay, that could be a book. Sorry. That could be a book. But I didn't start to write it because I get ideas for books all the time. And I couldn't possibly write every book that I think of. So I put it aside. I was just like, yeah, there's really not enough there anyway. And the reason I wrote the book is because I was stuck writing another book. I was working on Lost, which is also historical fiction set in New York City at the turn of the last century in 1911 on the Lower East Side of New York. And I had tried writing this book, well, by the end, 5 times. I wrote the book 5 times. So I was somewhere in that process of having written it and thrown out the draft and started all over again, writing it, throwing out the draft, putting it up on a shelf, leaving it for a year, coming back to it. And it was so frustrating, and I was so feeling the dissatisfaction with not being able to finish a book. And I thought, you know what? I just need a writing exercise. I just need something I can just start and finish in a short amount of time, and then nobody will ever see it. It's just a writing exercise. I'll put it away, and then I'll go back to the real book I'm writing, Lost. And so that summer of 2005, all 3 of my kids were in camp at the same time for the first time ever. And I had 7 hours a day to work on my writing, which I'd never had in my short career. And sure enough, I would sit down and for 7 hours just pound, pound, pound. And at the end, after 19 days, because that's how long camp was, I had finished the book. And I thought, great. Now I'm ready to do the work I'm really meant to do. And I was ready to put it in a drawer. And I thought, you know what? I'll just show it to the writers group. I'll just see. And they read it and they said, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, okay, I have a good relationship with my editor and writer at Houghton Mifflin at that time. I'll show it to her. And that's how it became a book. And I did end up finishing Lost, which is really important to me. It took me 10 years to write Lost, and it took me 19 days to write The Lemonade War. And I would never compare the two and say which one is better. They are both their own thing, and I'm very proud of both of them. But that's how that book happened. It was supposed to be a writing exercise that nobody ever saw. That's part of the freedom of writing it. Nobody was ever going to see this. It was just about starting and finishing a book so that I kind of got my confidence back and got that mojo back. And it turned out to be The Lemonade War.
Wow. Which was just the beginning of the tip of the iceberg, I guess I say. The beginning of the domino of, oh my gosh,
Yes.
that wasn't supposed to be.
And again, so easy to look back now, with all the hindsight. Remember, back then, the book came out in a sea of middle grade novels coming out. My editor had she really wanted to help boost that book. And so she did write a personal letter that went out to the librarians and teachers who are most in the sphere of children's literature. So she wrote a letter saying this book is different. Um, I don't know that that had any that had any effect on it. The book came out. It was a standalone book. It was never going to be a series. Nobody had any expectations for it. First year in hardcover, it sold a respectable amount. Nothing I need to be embarrassed about, but nothing that was catching anybody's eye.
Mhm.
And then when the book came out in paperback, it started picking up. And when I visited schools, the very first question I asked from kids who had read the book was, what happened to the money that disappears at the end of the book? Because at the end of the money, $208 disappears out of Evan's shorts pocket, and you never find out in that book who took it. And the reason we did that was because I asked my editor, I said, Anne, is it okay that we don't explain where the money went? And she said, well, that's real life. In real life, things disappear and you don't know where. And it wasn't the purpose of the book, so we decided to leave it. It was like it was a plot point that got the book going in a different direction, but it wasn't important to the story. And so I would say that to kids. They'd say, what happened to the $208? And I said, oh, the $208, that's not what the book's about. It's not really important. The book is about Evan and Jesse and the argument they're having, and the money doesn't matter. And they said, yes, it does. It matters a lot. It's $208. We want to know what happened. And after a year and a half of hearing this question from kids, and I got it at every school visit I did, I went back to Anne and I said, Anne, I think I need to write a sequel. I think I need to explain what happened to the money. And she said, okay, because the book was doing pretty well. She said, okay. And the first book was doing pretty well. And I said, and in fact, I'm envisioning a 5-book series. What do you think about that? And she said, whoa, whoa, whoa. We'll just do the sequel. That's all we're going to commit to at this point. And we don't know if this is going to be a series. Well, by the time the second book came out, the first book was, selling like gangbusters. And she was like, yes. And so I envisioned this 5-book series, which ended with The Magic Trap. And I was so pleased because I had really brought the story back around. I had answered every question that was initially raised in the first book, but maybe not explored. Every one of those books goes back to something that happened in the first book. Nothing just comes out of the blue and suddenly that's the story. And I would visit schools and kids would say, are there going to be more Lemonade War books after I'd written the 5? And I said, oh, no, I'm sorry. The series is done. I'm working on other things now. There aren't going to be any more Lemonade War books. And I said that for like 3, maybe 4 years. All of a sudden, I got an idea. After the series was finished for 3 or 4 years, I got an idea about Evan and Jesse, another story. And I was so intrigued by it, What would happen if Jessie had to deal with those mean girls from 2nd grade again? How would she do that? And that became the 6th book in the series, The Bridge Battle. So now when kids ask me, are there going to be any more books in this series? I say, well, never say never. Right. I'm not going to make that mistake twice. I don't know. I don't have an idea for another one. But if another idea pops up, I would definitely go for it because I love these characters. I love these characters in a way, it's just an overwhelming feeling of knowing them and loving them and caring about them. And so if another story idea came up, I would write another book in the series.
Yeah. Readers embraced the characters, schools, librarians, educators. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, my own children's school had it as a summer read-along. And we were reading your book on blankets at picnic. We were all making lemonade. It was this big community event that just layered on top of the snuggly reading that we were doing at home. And my school was not the only one, right? Schools, librarians, educators have really embraced this book for good reason. And I feel like it's a book, it's a series, and it's also kind of a movement, a community book.
It is in its own way. Boy, was that not expected. I mean, the one school, one book reading concept was taking off at this time. It took several years for the Lemonade War to get on the list of, well, let's say Read to Them, which is an organization that helps people with putting on these events. And but once it got on, it's now often the number one uh, requested book through that organization. At the moment, there's a program going on, states read one book. And there are 7 states, New York, Los Angeles, New York, Texas, Florida, Michigan, Alabama, Mississippi,
Wow.
Arkansas, a whole bunch, Virginia. So a whole bunch of states are reading it as a whole state, which is um, thrilling. It's
Yeah.
just really exciting to think of that many kids. But there's so many things I love about the one school, one book concept. I love the integral to that is parents reading alongside, teachers reading alongside, cafeteria workers reading alongside, principals reading alongside. So the concept is when you walk into that school, you've all read the same chapter the night before, you can start a conversation with anybody
Yes.
about what happened. And from what I've seen and from what I hear, conversations are happening. And that is really, really important to me. It's wonderful when a single reader reads a book, but when a whole group reads it and commits to talking about it, that's when a book becomes powerful. And so I never could have planned for such a thing. I am thrilled beyond words. I am delighted that the teachers and librarians have found such creative ways to integrate the Lemonade War into different parts of the curriculum that the kids have. You can go on the internet and find just wonderful educational packages that the teachers have
Yeah.
created to help each other to get the most out of the book. And it's like it takes a village. The whole village is making this happen. So I couldn't be happier.
Yeah. So how do you get to this graphic novel version? What was the inspiration or the tipping point or the question or the thing that thought, huh, this is the next phase for the Lemonade War.
Right, right. It was a bit of a process. Obviously, I was starting to read graphic novels. Well, I'd been reading graphic novels. I mean, my gosh, I read Mouse back when it came out.
Yeah.
That's an adult graphic novel. Stitches by David Small, which is sometimes considered a young adult book. I think it's an adult book. And then like Roller Girl and just so many fantastic graphic novels. So I was reading them and enjoying them, but also, perhaps because of my age, very aware that this was a different way to access a story. It didn't feel to me, reading a graphic novel did not feel to me like reading a prose novel. And I was very aware of the things I liked about it and maybe the things that I was a little more hesitant about. So, interest in the form started. I was interested in the form of the graphic novel. Well, then, it started to be a thing that, and this is in the very beginning, it started to be something where middle grade novels were being adapted into graphic novels. And I was like, what? How's that happening? That's an interesting development. And so I decided to take, actually, I have to give credit to Grace Lynn, a friend of mine, because she was going to take a highlights at the Highlights Foundation. They do weekend-long workshops, and they were doing one on the graphic novel. And so she said, I'm going to go to this. Do you want to go? And I said, sure. So, off we went to Honing, Pennsylvania for 4 days. And it was an amazing experience. We're very seasoned professionals like Colleen A.F. Venable was there and just terrific speakers. And so we were studying how to create a graphic novel. Now, both Grace and I were there with the idea that we were going to be adapting one of our middle grade novels. So that's a slightly different thing, but still, it was laying the foundation. It was giving us the basics, the stuff that we needed to know. And so I learned a lot. I took a lot of notes. But on the last morning, the Sunday, before we were all going to leave at noon, I got up early for a bike ride. I had brought my bike with me. And I got into an accident. And I completely destroyed my left elbow. I broke the bone. I
Oh no.
dislocated it. I obliterated one of the ligaments that couldn't be saved. I cut through a tendon. It was a really bad accident.
This is not
And
just a
so,
scrape.
no, 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 this was bad. I had to be rushed to the emergency room and all kinds of stuff. And I had to go through surgery, and it got dislocated twice. And it was something. So I have to say that most of what I learned at that workshop got wiped out of my brain because of this accident. It's kind of like the one thing I remember about it, but I did have my notes. And the thing is that seeing the trend of what was happening with middle grade novels, particularly kind of the beloved modern classics, which The Lemonade War fits into, being translated into graphic novel form, I had a sense that the publisher would want to go in that direction at some point, and I was darn sure I was going to be the one to write it. I just couldn't even imagine handing the writing of the graphic novel over to somebody else. So, so I thought, well, I better get my act together and learn how to do this. And so I went to my publisher and said, would this be something you'd be interested in? They said, absolutely. And so I went at it, and I wrote that first draft, and I submitted it to my editor. And the thing I learned most importantly about going from middle grade prose to a graphic novel was about pacing. It's all about pacing in a graphic novel. So here I am suddenly going from, I'm used to working with words, sentences, paragraphs, chapters. That's my structure for writing. And suddenly I have to go page, panel, panel description, and then either dialogue, thought bubble, or sound effects. And it was such a radically different way of writing. Took me a while to get into the swing of it. For a while, I clung too tightly to the middle grade novel and was just like transcribing, and that doesn't work. But I finally got a draft together that I felt was good enough to show to my editor. And when she sent it back, all of her comments, and I mean all of them, were combine, 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 3 panels into 1, 2 panels into 1, just like basically saying, keep moving the story along and have faith that the illustrator is going to be able to show 3 actions within 1 panel. For each action, I made a panel, a panel, a panel. And then the editor was explaining to me, the illustrator will be able to take those 3 actions, show movement through time and movement across space, and then it's just snappier, just moving right along. So when I started to do the revision, I was following her comments of combine these panels, but then I stopped looking at her comments and I just said, what would I combine? And I went through for the rest of the book and did my own, oh, look at this. This can be combined into 1 panel. This can be shortened up. And then when I went back and looked at her comments, we had chosen exactly the same panels. So it was very clear where I had missed the boat in terms of moving the story along. So I cut, I think, close to 100 pages out of that draft. I think I went from a 300 page draft down to about a 210 page draft. And then there were some more changes that we made, but that was a fantastic learning experience.
I can imagine. Because that's what I was thinking as I was reading it, of how do you still have that same spirit and the same feel of the book, but with drastically fewer words. And you mentioned the illustrator, which I would love for you to mention and give some props to.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. I feel so lucky that we got Karen de la Vega. She is so extremely talented. And when I was looking at her portfolio, when we were, deciding, the things that I noticed most specifically that made me say I want her is this remarkable ability to show greatly nuanced emotion on faces, which not everybody can do, especially if you slip into the manga style where the faces tend to be a little bit more set. Karen was able to, I mean, not just say, oh, she's embarrassed, but she's embarrassed and feeling a little sad and maybe a little bit guilty about something she just did. I mean, she can just put it all in a face, and it's
Yeah.
remarkable. The other thing that I loved about her was her ability to show motion. And it's exactly what I was talking about, that motion through time. In a single panel, we'd see one action on the left, the result in the middle, and then some sort of conclusion at the end, all within one panel. And I just thought she did that beautifully. But the thing that got me going on her more than anything else, and that you will see in the graphic novel version of The Lemonade War over and over and over again, is she comes up with really interesting compositions. The composition of her illustration on the page, the use of light, the use of perspective, the use of close-up versus,
Yes.
far away wide angle. It makes it so that the panel is dramatic all on its own without the words. I mean, just looking at it, there is so much conflict and drama and tension in each of these panels. And I thought that is a rare talent. So what a thrill. What a thrill it was to have her do my first graphic novel book. I feel extremely lucky.
Yeah. Now, you just said first graphic novel.
So here's the thing. It was hard to learn how to write a graphic novel script. It took me a while. I don't want to waste that. I don't want to waste that learning, that education. So yes, I do have an idea, and this one is for an original graphic novel, which I think is going to be very different to write.
Yeah.
Starting with a book like The Lemonade War, which I know so well. I mean, I've written 6 books about these characters. I know them to the bone. Now to think about writing a character that's brand new, where I know that in the writing process, there's so much discovery, there's so much learning about who these characters are. That's going to be very challenging, but I am intrigued. It's not my next book that I'm going to write. It's not even maybe my next book, but it might be the 3rd book. I'm definitely interested because I have a very particular story idea that is best suited to the graphic form.
Do you think you will start in prose and shift to graphic, or will your brain just go right to graphic?
That is such a good question. And I've thought about it. My guess is I'll do a lot of journaling. I'll spend a lot of time just free writing stuff about the characters. I'll definitely figure out some plot points on paper ahead of time. But then I think I might be best served by going straight into the form, because the form and the content. I mean, it's what makes a story happen. So that's my guess. I will let you know after I try it.
Good. Now, you mentioned a couple of other things floating around that perhaps might come first. Can you give us a little insight into those ideas and what might be coming?
I can give you, yes, I certainly can. So I am always working on the next book. Now, remember, the graphic novel is coming out, but my work on it was done, several months ago. So I have my next book 3/4 of the way written, so it's well on its way. But it has gone through many different changes, and I'll be honest, I've struggled with it. Finding out what the story is really about. At first, I thought the story was about a boy wanting one thing, and then I realized, oh no, that's not what he really wants. This is what he wants. I will just say it's about a boy who moves to a new town, doesn't know anybody. There are certain circumstances around that, and he decides he wants to help his dad with the household bills by starting a dog walking business. And one of the problems is he doesn't have any experience with dogs at all. So it's a steep learning curve in a brand new town where he doesn't know anybody. He doesn't know the ways that things get done in this particular town as opposed to his other town. So he's trying to figure out how to fit in at the same time that he's trying to find his pack. And that's what the book is about. But I'm still working on it. And then the next one is an idea that is still forming. I couldn't even begin to say what it's about.
Yeah. Well, I love how you mentioned earlier, right? Even if you're not physically writing on the page, you're always writing in your
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
It's always there. Those ideas are always there.
Yeah, it never ends. It
Yeah.
never ends coming up with new ideas, but also, just like minding your own business, pouring your cereal in the morning and suddenly thinking,
Yeah.
"Oh, she's related to that character. Oh, I didn't realize that." Or like with my last book, The International House of Dereliction, which is a story about a house that is alive. Not it doesn't speak, it doesn't walk, but there's a presence to it. And young Alice, 10-year-old Alice, goes into the house, which is not allowed. It's boarded up, it's condemned. Nobody's supposed to go in. But she does go in, and I'm writing away the book, and I think it might be in chapter 5 or something. I'm writing away, and all of a sudden, she's in the house all by herself, and a voice is heard, and it turns out it's a ghost. And I had no idea that there were ghosts in the house. So, sometimes even when you're even when you're working on a book, ideas just come out of nowhere. And you don't know whether to put them on the page or whether to shelve them away. I tend to try them. I like to see what happens. So I put that ghost in. And then two more showed up, and there's the story of the International House of Dereliction as Alice tries to help these ghosts who are trapped in the house move on to the next stage.
Mm. Well, I'm so glad that those ideas keep coming to you because as readers, we quite enjoy them.
I'm very glad they keep coming too. I hope they always do.
Yes. So, where is the best place for listeners to find you to keep track of you,
Sure.
of those books coming up?
So you can always go to my website. That's a great place to go. And I have a monthly newsletter, and I strongly encourage you to sign up for my monthly newsletter. I give away free books every single month. I start out by telling a little story about my life, just a short little glimpse into my life, and then there's just news that you can follow if you're interested. I always include a little funny video at the end related to me, the writing process, or something that I saw that I think would be of interest to teachers and librarians who care about kids' books.
Mm.
So please do go to my newsletter. You can go to the first page of my website and just scroll down a tiny bit, and you can sign right up. I'm also on Instagram, and I also have a YouTube channel, which at
Oh.
first started out being just gathering all the information on YouTube, all the videos on YouTube that other people had made about the book, either
Mhm.
ways, inspiration for teachers and librarians about things that you could do, or funny skits, or opening assemblies, or lots of different things. Readings of my books. I've got a fantastic reader of Bubbles Up. I've got a fantastic reader of Panda Pants. There's some celebrity readers. Mark Cuban read a chapter of The Lemonade War
Wow.
on a YouTube video. So I gathered all these things up, and then I thought, I should add some of my own material. So I'm starting to do that more and more. So there's some fun videos on YouTube as well. And I just do want to say that right now, because I'm not sure when this is going to air, but the book comes out on April 29th. If you see this before April 29th, you can go, there's a pre-order campaign right now where you can go to silverunicornbooks.com, which is a bookstore, and you can pre-order the book through them, and you get a fun free sticker book. The book will be autographed by me with your name written in it. So it's a personally autographed book, and it will get mailed out to you free of charge on or before. We're really trying to get the books out before they're available to the general public. So just in case that's of interest.
That is of interest. Thank you so much for coming on to talk today.
Thank you
I'm
for
so
having
excited.
me.
Yeah, the
It feels like talking to a friend. It feels like, we're just catching up on
yes.
things.
Yes, that is my hope, and I feel that too. And what I love, like what I'm really ending the call feeling is you love this and you are continually growing and evolving and sharing it with us. And that besides your books is just another beautiful thing to learn from you. So thank you.
I am always looking for the next challenge. I always want to
Yeah.
try that next thing that I haven't done before. It keeps it fresh, it keeps it new. And I can build on, 20 years of experience of creating story, because creating story is the same thing, whether we do it in graphic form or
Right.
poetry form or prose form or YouTube video form. It's still telling a story. So that will never grow old for me.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, thank you. It was such a pleasure. I so loved it. And listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of KidLit Love, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the KidLit Love podcast. You'll find links to all of the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. You'll also find KidLit Love on Substack. That's where you'll find posts for each episode, monthly KidLit roundups, and an invitation to join my summer book club and go deeper into the world of children's literature. And if you loved this podcast and want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing to build a life you love. One more thing. If you loved what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of Kid Lit Love. Thanks for listening.